Welcome everyone. Welcome everyone to Faithful Democracy's Good Trouble Lives On webinar for this evening. Please take your time, get settled in. We are waiting for others to join us. But in the meantime, I'm going to issue some housekeeping rules. So if you would, please do put your name and location in the chat, and we'd be more than happy to see where you all are tuning in from. And we'll move forward in about 1 or 2 minutes. Just letting people log in to see where we're from. All right, see there's people from the East Coast, West Coast, from California, New Jersey, Illinois, Arizona, Fort Worth, Texas. Yes, indeed, I am from Texas, so good to have you all with us. All right. I'm grateful to have people of faith and of different faiths joining us, and people of no faith that are welcome to see what what we're doing here in Washington D.C. and all across the country as it pertains to voting rights. We're grateful to have you all with us. If you're just now joining us, please do put your name and where you're coming from in the chat, and we'll get started in a minute. We have a couple of housekeeping rules. Please use the Q&A option to issue your questions, and to also look out for resources that we'll be dropping periodically throughout the webinar in the chat. So be sure to look for that. And we'll get started in a quick minute. It's good to see so many people interested in this webinar, especially for this week as we celebrate John Lewis's legacy and moving it forward to advance voting rights here in our country. So I think we're at a good place to go ahead and get started. My name is Minister Christian S. Watkins. I am with Network Lobby, and I'm one of the co-chairs of the Faithful Democracy Coalition here in Washington, D.C., an interfaith grouping of advocacy organizations, faith-based advocacy organizations that are advancing voting rights, as well as DC statehood here in Washington, D.C., on behalf of many people of faith from across the country. As I said before, please use the Q&A option to ask questions, and to ask questions of our individual panelists that we'll see throughout the evening. And I want to introduce those speakers as we will see them. But on tonight's webinar, we will have the Reverend Moya Harris. She is the Director of Social Justice for Sojourners and Sojo Action. We also have Jake Silverman, who is a legislative assistant for Representative Nakima Williams of Georgia's 5th District. We have Caitlin Jean A. Jurek, the legislative director as well as legal counsel for Representative Jasmine Crockett from my hometown, Texas, Congressional District 30. That's South Dallas and Oak Cliff. So we are grateful to have her with us. We have with us Reverend Dr. Monica Spencer. She is the interim Georgia State Director for Vote Riders, very influential organization that mobilizes and organizes people of faith and people in general in Georgia to engage, to be informed and engaged in Georgia politics, as well as across the state for federal elections. And lastly, we have our other two Faithful Democracy co-chairs, Talia Steinberg from the National Council of Jewish Women, as well as Adam Friedman from Interfaith Alliance. So we're grateful to see you all with us. We're grateful to have you all with us, and for this moment that we find ourselves in, we have the challenge from John Lewis. He said, he taught us that the vote is precious, almost sacred. If it's not us, who? If not now, when. So with that, and as people of faith, we will begin in prayer. If you will, Holy God, as you are called by many names, Spirit of the living God, fall fresh on us. Spirit of justice, fall fresh in this place. Help us to discern what is good and what is right, and help us to discern how best we shall move together to advance justice in the land of the living. These things we pray. Amen. So without further ado, I want to introduce Reverend Moya Harris, Director of Social Justice from Sojourners, who will give us our faith and current political reality grounding. Moya?
It is so great to be here. Thank you so much, Minister Christian, for getting us started. Trouble can be defined in many ways. A distressing or dangerous situation, a state of unrest or conflict between opposing factions, a source of irritation or pain, a breakdown in operation or function, behavior marked by clowning around and foolishness, situations that demand resolution, or even death, destruction, or some other terrible fate. We gather tonight in the midst of a world saturated in trouble. We hear day after day that these are unprecedented times, that we have never seen anything like this before. But for many of us, especially people of Black and Brown communities, Indigenous people, immigrants, working class, poor families, this is not new. It's easy to grow numb, to let the chaos feel normal. The fear is real in immigrant communities. Black and brown lives hang in the balance. Working class people and the poor struggle under rising costs, low wages, inaccessible healthcare, and systems that profit from their misery. Federal workers losing their careers. As Fannie Lou Hamer says, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. That big, horrible bill that they just passed, it's not just policy, it's a theological document. Nearly 1,000 pages revealing the God its authors worship, a God of death and destruction, greed and terror. It's the same God who demands sacrifice from the poor so that the wealthy can grow richer. That is not the God of justice and love we know from our sacred texts. And let's name this plainly. This agenda is cloaked in white Christian nationalism. Policies that deal with death are justified with scripture, twisted to serve power. They talk about faith while advancing hate. They speak of morality while legislating oppression. White Christian nationalism is not Christianity. It is an ideology of domination. It is the spiritual armor of white supremacy. This movement seeks to return us to a time when citizenship and humanity were reserved for white, Christian, heterosexual, property-owning men. It is the same impulse that denied Black people the right to read, to congregate, to own property. That enforced racial hierarchy through violence and terror, through lynching and the KKK. It is the same impulse of manifest destiny where Christianity was used to colonize lands and cultures and bodies. It is the same impulse that would gut voting rights, criminalize dissent, and control bodies. And it is the same impulse that now threatens birthright citizenship itself. We need to understand this clearly. Attacks on birthright citizenship are attacks on the 14th Amendment, the very foundation of equality under law. The 14th Amendment was born during the Reconstruction era, during the Civil War, out of the struggle of newly freed people to claim their full humanity and participation in its democracy. It is the amendment that guarantees that anyone born on this soil is a citizen. If they can undermine that principle, they can shrink the electorate. They can exclude immigrants, the children of immigrants, Black and brown communities from the democratic process. This is about maintaining minority rule, about making sure we never achieve a multiracial democracy that represents the very people who populate this country. Because when all of us have the vote, When Black, brown, indigenous, immigrant, young people, old people, in the middle people, working class, poor, marginalized people can shape the future, justice becomes possible. And that is what they fear. We must also talk about how these oppressive policies take root. Misinformation and disinformation thrive when there's a lack of trust, when people lose faith in religious institutions that refuse to speak truth, when churches remain silent about injustice or worse, actively spread lies, when media is concentrated in too few hands and profit matters more than truth, when conspiracy places community and propaganda replaces prophetic witness. This is why it is so important for progressive people of faith to reclaim the narrative. We cannot let the loudest religious voices be those who preach hate. We must be clear. The God of justice calls us to love our neighbor, to welcome the stranger, and to defend the vulnerable. Voting is at the center of how we push back the trouble we face. Denying the vote is not new. It is an old, well-worn tactic of white supremacy and class oppression. Poll taxes once targeted the poor and Black. Literacy tests targeted Black people in the South just a generation or two out of slavery. Today, we see voter ID laws, voter roll purges, closed polling places, long lines in working class neighborhoods, intimidation at the polls while books are banned and history is being rewritten. We even see attempts to strip citizenship itself to limit who can vote. In 2025, really 2025, we're not talking about 1965, but in 2025, 22 states have enacted new barriers from strict ID laws to reduced polling places. Protecting the right to vote is protecting every other right we have as citizens of the world. As John Lewis proclaimed, the vote is precious. It's almost sacred. It is the most powerful nonviolent tool we have in a democratic society. That's why they want to take it away. Because without a vote, you cannot defend your right to health care, housing, education, safety, and dignity. As Fannie Lou Hamer also said, nobody's free until everybody's free. So how do we respond? By engaging in good trouble. Good trouble means disturbing the status quo, organizing, educating, marching, voting, and making sure everyone's voice is heard by any means necessary. As John Lewis taught us, never ever be afraid to make some noise and get in good trouble. Necessary trouble. That is our mandate in this moment. Good trouble is fighting for living wages, for health care, for housing, for the dignity of every worker and every family. It is refusing to let systems profit from poverty and punish the marginalized. It is challenging white Christian nationalism, not just in the halls of power, but in the pulpits, in our congregations, and in our families. It's calling on people of faith to be the hands and feet of the divine and protecting democracy itself. It was the strategy of John Lewis. It is the spirit of Ella Baker, who said strong people don't need strong leaders. And as Audre Lorde told us, your silence will not protect you. Silence is complicity. We cannot afford to be quiet now. We must become experts in good trouble if we are going to protect our freedoms, our dignity, and our very lives. Because as Ella Baker taught us, we who believe in freedom cannot rest. So take this blessing as we continue on learning more what we can do to protect the vote. We may have the courage to do so. We may have the courage to do what love demands. Let me start over again. May we have the courage to do what love demands. May we refuse to bow to any god of death and destruction. May we choose justice over greed, community over isolation, solidarity over silence. May we choose to get in some good trouble. For as John Lewis asked us, if not us, then who? If not now, then when? The time is now. Beloved, now I would like to introduce Faithful Democracy's co-chair, Talia Steinberg from the National Council of Jewish Women.
Thank you so much, Moya. It is so inspiring to hear from you. I'm like tearing up over here. So thank you, Moya, for those inspiring words. Like Moya said, I'm Talia Steinberg. I'm the Associate Director of Government Relations and Advocacy at National Council of Jewish Women. We are a over 130-year-old Jewish feminist civil rights organization working for equity and justice for women, children, and families. I'm proud to be one of the co-chairs for Faithful Democracy, along with the amazing Minister Christian Watkins, who spoke at the beginning, and the amazing Adam Freeman, who will speak later. And I'm honored to be here with all of you advocates today. Really, it's a true honor to see so many of you on with us and to hear from these amazing panelists and leaders in faith and justice. My organization and so many of the organizations represented here and not represented here are guided by a moral imperative, a commandment, like Moya said, to pursue tzedek, which is the Hebrew word in my faith for justice. We are communities across faiths, and we are here on this call, guided by our religious texts and our values, like we heard before, to speak up and push back against all the injustice that Moya outlined so powerfully. As all of you know, and as we heard before, justice requires that every vote is counted and every voice is heard. So that's what we're here today to talk about. That is how we're going to honor John Lewis's legacy as we gather for this reason, to honor him, a great civil rights giant who dedicated his life to fighting for justice. We are reminded of this obligation to continue his sacred work. So as Moya kind of touched upon so beautifully, we're facing this moment of widespread voter suppression across the country, disproportionately impacting access to the ballot for communities of color, minority language speakers, low-income voters, older adults, women, and so many more. So that's why we're gathering today to talk about the bills that I will share in just a moment. That's why we're here as advocates in faith, and why we're advocating this week and this Thursday on the anniversary of the great John Lewis's passing for the following key legislation to right these wrongs that Moya laid out, to protect the right to vote, to protect our democracy for every person. So I'm going to get into some nitty gritty. Really grateful that all of you are here, and please bear with me. There's a lot of awesome legislation to hear about. So the first and biggest, most, obvious bill that we want everybody to be advocating on this week and beyond is, of course, the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, named in the name of the great John Lewis. This bill will help ensure that we all have an equal say in our future. So a bit about why this bill is so important in this moment. In 2013, the Shelby County v. Holder Supreme Court decision gutted the Voting Rights Act, which was, all of you, know better than most, being these advocates that you are, a devastating blow to the right to vote and to access to the ballot. This decision in the Supreme Court basically undid the federal government's ability to review really discriminatory changes to election laws. That process, that review, is called preclearance. So the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act will restore preclearance. It will restore the strength of the Voting Rights Act. It will require that states are transparent about any changes that they make to voting rules. And it also creates new legal avenues to challenge voting rights violations. So this is such an important bill. And like Moya said, this voter suppression we're seeing all around the country needs this fix. So I'm going to share about a few more bills that we are hoping everybody will continue to advocate for this week and beyond. The Freedom to Vote Act, a crucial bill, will remove barriers to the ballot and implement protections to maintain free and fair elections. This bill protects voters' voices in several ways, including ending partisan gerrymandering. I don't have to tell this group how bad that is. Making key campaign finance reforms, countering harmful election sabotage efforts. It also implements big changes to improve voter access, election integrity, civic participation and empowerment. It will also help ensure that every voice and every vote is heard, counted, and protected. Few more, so thanks for bearing with me here. The other bills, the other policies that we are pushing forward in the name of good trouble are the Native American Voting Rights Act, the Washington, D.C. Admission Act and the restoration of D.C.'s budget, as well as Representative Nikema Williams's package of voting rights and democracy improvements, and Representative Jasmine Crockett's Swift Vote Act. So we've talked about the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. We've talked about the Freedom to Vote Act. Now, the Native American Voting Rights Act seeks to protect voting rights for Indigenous communities who face immense obstacles to accessing the ballot. It'll help ensure fair access to voter registration, early voting, election day polling locations are accessible, and that there's drop boxes on Native lands. It also requires that tribally or federally issued IDs are accepted where voter IDs are, to our dismay, required. And also provides for culturally appropriate language assistance. You'll see a theme across all of these bills, expanding access to the ballot for every person. Faithful Democracy, and hopefully all of you with us together, are also urging that Congress pass the Washington, D.C. Admission Act and that Congress restore D.C.'s budget autonomy, because democracy is stronger when every person, every American, including those in the nation's capital, right here where I am, has full representation and control over their own local affairs. So the Washington, D.C. Admission Act would make D.C. the 51st state. How exciting would that be? It would ensure that D.C. residents have equal representation in Congress, which is so important because D.C. statehood is a racial justice issue. Let me say that again. DC statehood is a racial justice issue. If this law is passed, this law that would secure DC statehood, it would finally extend voting representation, the very foundation of our democracy, to the wonderful people of DC, which is a majority Black and Brown population who is currently disenfranchised from representation. Like, how awful is that? So the District of Columbia Local Funds Act, in relation to the DC statehood bill, would restore the District of Columbia's ability to spend its locally raised tax dollars under its already congressionally approved budget for this fiscal year. This is all so important to making sure DC has the autonomy to make their voice heard and spend their money. So I will allow for our wonderful next speakers to share more about the remaining legislation that we are including in our advocacy today and this week. As we gather in solidarity to carry forward John Lewis's legacy, we affirm that the work he led remains so urgent and so necessary. So just again, thank you all for joining this movement, for being part of this movement. Together, we can continue to make that good trouble and build a more just, inclusive, and faithful democracy for all. So I'm proud to introduce my good friend, Jake Silverman, a voting rights policy expert, a civil rights policy expert, and the legislative assistant for Rep. Nikema Williams, who is leading one of these key bills. And Rep. Williams is, as some of you may know, John Lewis's successor in Congress. So I can't imagine a better voice to hear from than one of her amazing staff. So Jake, take it away.
Hi, thank you so much, Talia. So as she mentioned, I'm Jake. I am the legislative assistant for Congresswoman Nikema Williams, the successor to Congressman John Lewis. So 2 years ago, for the 60th anniversary of the March on Washington, Congresswoman Williams introduced the Voting Rights Series, which is a series of 8 bills addressing a bunch of different aspects of various efforts of voter suppression. This time we're going to do it. The Congresswoman is going to introduce it around the 60th anniversary of the Voting Rights Act in early August. And this time it will be 11 bills. So I'm going to go through what each of them does. Happy to answer any questions. If anyone wants to drop them in the chat, I'll try to be quick. And then to answer, what y'all can do is reach out to your members of Congress, try to get them to sign on to these bills. I think Adam's going to drop some information about them in the chat, because ultimately, we know that we don't necessarily have the ability to pass them right now. But what we can do is make sure that we're laying the groundwork so that as soon as we flip the House, flip the Senate, flip the presidency back, have the groundwork all laid to get these bills moved into law. So the first one is the Expanding the Vote Act. That one is about language accessibility in elections. So making it easier for language minority voters to get translated ballots, increasing access to language minority citizens. The next one is the Sustaining Our Democracy Act. That is mandatory funding for election administration so that jurisdictions have enough polling locations and ballot boxes and administrators who are well paid and have security so we can get our results reliably and quickly. Next is the Voters on the Move Registration Act, which helps people stay registered as they move around. Next one is the Unhoused Vote Act, which is protections and minimum standards and resources to make sure that unhoused people can vote and have their voice heard. Next is the Election Mail Act, which improves the delivery and processing of election mail. There's the People Over Long Lines Act, which is kind of exactly what it sounds like. And that one is actually co-led by Representative Crockett and CJ, who'll talk next after me, which sets minimum standards for how long people may wait in line to vote and provides resources to reduce voter wait times. Then there's the Youth Voting Rights Act, which again, resources, standards, minimum requirements around how to make sure that young voters aren't disenfranchised and targeted. The Time Off to Vote Act, which then mandates that all workers receive protected time off in order to vote. That complements the Election Day Holiday Act, right? Because not everyone gets off for federal holidays. Or even if you do, your kids may get off too, right? So you have childcare responsibilities, make sure everyone is able to take that time. Then some of the new bills that we're doing this Congress is the Help America Run Act, which would allow just like codify into law regulations around using campaign funds for childcare and healthcare so that people with those caregiving responsibilities are still able to run, serve in Congress, serve in office, and have that perspective in office, which has been really underrepresented throughout history. Next one is the Funding Research into Efficient and Effective Elections Act, which would fund research into improving how elections are administered. So better ballot designs, better security measures, better outreach methods. And finally is a bill around registration challenges. So you've all seen news around registration challenge portals where people can go in and challenge someone's registration if they think they're not registered or think they're not eligible, and it's usually used to harass people with different sounding names. So putting some minimum requirements and standards and safeguards around those. So that's all 11 bills. Thankfully, they've been written down somewhere, so you don't have to remember all of those. But ultimately, what it would be wonderful, I'm sure these can be sent out. I'm happy to send around some resources over to Adam who can get it to all of y'all, is to reach out to your members of Congress to get them on board, to have them support, so that as soon as we have the ability to get these passed, we can do so. And if no one has any questions, then I'm gonna not take any more time and just throw it over to one of probably about the 5 or so best legislative directors on the Hill for Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. She is a graduate of Notre Dame Law School and an alum of the Oversight Committee. And again, for Jasmine Crockett, who I'm sure you've all seen on TV. CJ?
Thanks, Jake. First of all, I just want to say I'm so grateful to be here amongst just amazing people. And I know on behalf of my boss, she would be thrilled to be here and speak to you all. You know, she's just so grateful for everybody's advocacy, for their support, and just for continuing this fight as it has been under pressure, under threat in these past couple of years. And really all over, but we're just so grateful to be able to have this time and space to speak to everybody today. So I'm actually going to be talking about 2 bills this Congress that Congresswoman Crockett is introducing and looking for, support from members of Congress and just from the wider public. The first one that we want to talk about is the Democracy Restoration Act, which would restore the right to vote for formerly incarcerated and justice impacted individuals to vote in federal elections upon the fulfillment of their custodial sentence, and irrespective of we call the caveats. So irrespective of fines, fees, parole, probation, etc. This might sound familiar to a few of you individuals, particularly those in Florida. We've seen efforts at the state level to restore the right to vote for formerly incarcerated individuals. However, at the state level, we've seen various different carve-outs and rollbacks on this issue. So as we know that democracy is strongest when people have the right to have their voice heard, no matter their race, zip code, or conviction history. And yet millions of Americans today are who have actually paid their debt to society. They have been released from prison. They've paid restitution in some cases and fees and everything else, still don't have the right to vote. The US is actually one of the few Western democracies that allows the permanent denial of the right to vote for individuals with felony convictions. In 30 states, individuals with convictions may not vote while they're on parole. In 28 of those states, disenfranchise individuals with just felony prohibition as well. And then in 11 states, a conviction can result in lifetime disenfranchisement. So what our bill does is create a federal right to vote in federal elections, full stop, no caveats, no carve-outs. And so what that means is regardless of what you went to prison for and what you're convicted of, the moment that you come out of incarceration, the moment that you've paid that debt back to society, your right to vote is automatically restored. We've seen states create the carve-outs for white collar crime versus people who have had, say, drug convictions, aren't able to restore their vote. Under our bill, that right to vote would be automatic regardless of what that conviction was based on. In addition to that, these individuals who are going into incarceration and the moment that they come out are also informed of their right to vote. So as you know, sometimes individuals don't understand what rights they have. And so helping educate individuals about that right is critical in order for them to exercise it. So what this bill does is require individuals who are going into incarceration understand what their rights are upon the completion of their sentence. And then for individuals who are coming out of incarceration, they're also informed of their right to vote and what that looks like. So we will be introducing that bill on the 23rd, which is next Wednesday, I believe. And so I'll be sending that to Adam as well. But we would love to have you all advocate for the Democracy Restoration Act and having members support this bill. In the past, it's been included in the 116th, 117th HR 1 Freedom Vote. And then also last Congress, it was in the major omnibus package as well. So we would love to have that support. The second bill that we have is called the Swift Vote Act. And so similar to, with regards to the idea of wait times at polling locations, we have seen the significant access issue when it comes to wait times at polling locations. So while voting in federal elections has been, improved through, say, mail-in voting, we still know that our country continues to face serious problems in our election system, impacting voters' ability to cast their ballots, including in particular long wait times. So in 2016, we've seen significant, like millions of voters fail to vote because of problems associated with long wait times and management of polling locations. In the 2024 election, for example, people in Chicago waited as long as 4 hours to cast their vote. And those long lines caused people to actually walk away from the polls because they just couldn't be there that long. As Jake had mentioned, people have family, they have kids, they have individuals that they have to take care of. And so these long lines can frustrate and cause people to step away. This is the same for voters in Hawaii, voters in North Carolina, voters in Georgia, all across the country. Now, what we've seen is new election infrastructure investments that are helping to ease and address this problem. One of those has been the electronic poll books, or e-poll books, which are devices and software that partially and automatically that automates voter check-ins, assigns voters the correct ballot style, marks voters who have been issued a ballot. And these are used by election officials at polling locations to streamline the check-in process. They also help reduce errors, automate ballot issuing, and collect and display critical data, including check-in process and check-in and wait times at polling locations. So what our bill does is create a $120 million grant under the U.S. Election Assistance Commission for the purpose of procuring and maintaining poll books, as well as developing the capacity to collect and disseminate voter wait time. The critical part for us is having voter wait times accessible on, state websites, election commission websites, so that if you're trying to find a polling location and find the great time to vote, this information would be disseminated onto the state or local county election commission site and show individuals for what those wait times would be. Under the bill, if they would have to post wait time information on an hourly basis for polling locations that are open to voters 4 hours or fewer. And then if the polling location is open for more than 4 hours a day, the polling location would have to publish the wait times at least 4 regular intervals on that voting day. Again, we've seen people who show up to these locations, see how long the line is, and then just drive away, or they stay in there and not realize how long it's going to take. And so by creating this mechanism to have this voter information publicly available, it's going to help individuals find that right time that they're able to access the vote. Additionally, the devices are helpful because we're seeing fewer younger members of our communities actually volunteer as poll workers. And so for the amount of people that have, are retiring and they're no longer volunteering, this allows for youth to kind of get involved in that polling process and the election process and help streamline it a little bit more so that it can free up hands for people who may need assistance while casting their ballot or otherwise as needed. So, that bill we're also looking to introduce in August, actually 8th, around the same time that Representative Williams is going to be introducing hers. And I will mention that Rep. Williams is our co-lead on this bill, given that she is leading and we're co-leading their poll bill. So, we're extremely excited about these two bills about increasing access to vote for individuals who are formerly incarcerated and trying to, participate back in the democratic process again, as well as trying to ease what that process looks like for individuals to ensure that they have the time and space to do that at these locations. So we would love to have your organizations and you can highlight the Swift Vote Act and the Democracy Restoration Act during your time at an advocacy level. So if there's no big questions that I can answer at the moment, I do want to pass on the conversation to our Faithful Democracies co-chair, Adam Friedman from Interfaith Alliance.
Thank you. And I think we'll actually hop over to the Reverend Dr. Spencer, if that's right, and then I'll close it out.
Good evening, everyone, and certainly blessings to each of you. And we're grateful for this opportunity to share with the Faithful Democracy Coalition. We gather this evening as people of faith, a people who are concerned about and fighting for justice. We are the shared collective seeking, demanding, and working towards justice. And yes, good trouble lives on in all of us, and each of us on this call, and even in our communities. It's in the work of our hands, and it's in the intent in our heart. On the 17th of July, we honor the life and legacy of Congressman John Lewis, and we take action to defend our democracy and carry forward the legacy, his legacy of good trouble. As people of faith and conscience, we are called to stand up in this moment, not just in memory of John Lewis, but in commitment to what he referred to as the sacred right to vote. We are different faiths, but we are one people called to engage in intentional and authentic grassroots democracy. We do that in our respective communities and even in our homes. That engagement does not look the same everywhere, but it will equip and enable and empower people to get involved and to stay involved. And so to be involved in this work, others must know that we care. There's a level of investment that is required in this work. People of faith live by the command of God to care for one another, be it a neighbor, somebody who's hungry, somebody discouraged, someone from another country, somebody even who's on the other side of an aisle. Our faith connection gives us purpose and compels us. It constrains us. It requires us to care and to show compassion to those we love and even those we are challenged by. We love our neighbors as ourselves. We care and we collaborate. The beauty of faith communities is that we're all different. We're all so very different, and each of us brings that difference to the table. We bring our uniqueness to that table. Authentic grassroots democracy demands that we collaborate. It makes no sense for us to offer up a buffet and all we have is various types of potato salad and different types of baked beans. Every person in our democracy has something to give, has something to say and something to do, and we must partner and collaborate. For instance, Vote Riders is the leading national organization providing voter ID education and assistance. That's our focus, and that is what we do best. We do engage in other GOTV efforts, but IDs is what we do. We work with faith communities and non-faith communities to make sure people have an ID needed to go to the ballot box and vote with confidence. Not only vote, but also to navigate life. Throughout the state of Georgia, for instance, and even in our other target states, we partner with faith communities to hold voter ID clinics, whereby in real time, we assist individuals in getting a state ID, getting a birth certificate, and other underlying documents. We collaborate with community organizations, other GOTV orgs, and other types of agencies. There is power in working together. More is accomplished when we come together and we collaborate. The African proverb says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Authentic grassroots democracy is hard work. I think all of us on this call would agree that these past months have been wearisome and tiresome. And in the season, all of us are exhausted and we are tired. But we care nonetheless. We are compassionate. And as people of faith, we remain committed to keep going and to do something. We cannot afford to quit. We cannot and will not give up. I'm reminded of the Old Testament text in the book of Nehemiah, where the text says that the strength of the burden bearers is failing. They were rebuilding the wall and they were tired. They were under attack and they were tired. But with one hand, we too will pray. With one hand, we will do the work. And there will be those who will fight, resting when we need be, but the work will continue. Through the power of the Spirit of the Lord, we gain strength when we're weak. We press on when we're deterred. We care, we collaborate, and we remain committed. It is necessary that we remain informed and engaged, knowing that authentic grassroots democracy looks like me, it looks like you, it looks like congregations overflowing with parishioners, or the lone voice crying in the wilderness. It is found in the mothers of the church and the children in the synagogue. It's the melody that comes from the mosque. And most importantly, it's found in the mirror. We must care. We must collaborate. And we have no other choice but to remain committed. Be a troublemaker and make a difference. Remain educated, be aware, and stay engaged. As I close, I want to invite you to drop in the chat a note. Note a local group in your community, an agency in your community, maybe another faith community that could be across the street that you'll commit to partner with this week. Maybe even for the month, for the remainder of this month. But identify one organization that you will commit to partnering with, to collaborating with, so that you can stir up some trouble on your block or in your neighborhood or in your community. I encourage you to do that so that we can make a difference. And now I'm going to pass the conversation back to one of the Faithful Democracy's co-chairs, Adam Friedman, who is the organizing and election strategist at Interfaith Alliance. He's grounded in his faith and he's committed to the work that he does as he leads the organization's affiliate program, advancing national field policy efforts and managing its federal democracy and voting rights work. Blessings to each of you, and good night.
Wow, 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 wow. Well, first off, Dr. Spencer, I just want to convey my deep, deep gratitude for you joining us this evening, sharing your words of wisdom, and frankly, just your presence, which is always so deeply energizing and nourishing. I also want to take a moment after hearing from people who live and breathe this work every day to say thank you. Thank you to our amazing speakers for being on the webinar this evening and sharing your wisdom. Thank you to the over 350 people from across the country who took an hour out of their evening, some of you from Hawaii, an hour out of your afternoon, to join us and learn a bit more about how we can come together as a faithful community in the name of the late Congressman John Lewis and create good trouble. I also just want to name something. You know, there are questions in the chat that we're seeing. Some folks have messaged some of the speakers about the moment we're in, the reality of our current landscape. We know it is crucial to fight for legislation that we know will support us in pursuing justice. We know it is crucial to uphold that sacred right to vote. And we also know that though we've been here before, we are truly in a moment where we are fighting for our democracy, for the soul of our country. And so I just want to name that in addition to the fight to pass these bills, this crucial legislation to protect the right to vote, we also need to understand these bills as the foundation that creates the conditions under which we organize. The legislation that we're fighting for will fix gaps that have been created, will expand the right to vote to more and more Americans whose voices need to be heard. And I want to remind us all that showing up this Thursday at your local event to honor the Congressman John Lewis, hand in hand with your neighbors, organizations doing this work in your community, is another crucial way to fight for our democracy. These kinds of actions not only build solidarity across people in our communities, but they demonstrate to people who are the opponents of the right to vote, who are the opponents of democracy, who aim to consolidate power. These actions demonstrate to those folks that we are not going to stand idly by. We are standing up, we are mobilizing. And in fact, we know the research shows that when 3.5% of a country's population rise up and demonstrate, democracies U-turn, they grow stronger in the face of threats to voting or threats to the right to vote, in the face of threats to our very democracy. So again, I just want to name that as a crucial complement to this work of pursuing legislation to actualize and strengthen the right to vote for every eligible voter. We are also dedicated to showing up on Thursday in person or virtually, whatever works with your capacity. And we will continue to show up, not only at these large mobilizations, but day in and day out. I also want to, in addition to the links we'll drop in the chat in just a moment so you can take a look at where your local event is, I want to name a couple of other ways you can stay involved with us at Faithful Democracy and the amazing speakers on this call. We will also put a few links in the chat so you can take a look at the website where we link to every member of this coalition. And all of us are putting out action alerts. Some of us have phone banks. We have guides so you can reach out to your members of Congress and raise your moral voice and let them know what's on your mind. Many of our organizations in the coalition also have amazing guides for how you can do this local organizing in your community. And whether you're Catholic, whether you're a Reformed Jew, whether you're agnostic or humanist, there are organizations in this coalition that serve you directly. And I encourage you to take a look at this website, the link I'll put in the chat in just a moment, where you can find the organization that you see partnering with, you see leading into, and you want to do this work alongside. I also, for the folks who are asking, want to say that we will send you a post-event email with not only the recording of this webinar, but also the list of legislation we've spoken about this evening. We want to make sure you have all of the tools to advocate for these bills. So we will make sure all of that is shared with you. And to the folks who are based in the DMV, for those of you who are not from the East Coast, it's not the Department of Motor Vehicles, that's the DC, Maryland, Virginia area. For those of you who are near us in DC here and are planning to show up in person on Thursday to join us in advocacy in the halls of Congress, we are going to be gathering at the House Triangle. We'll send a pre-event email out tomorrow, so you will have all of that information. But at 10 a.m. on Thursday morning, we will be gathering and advocating for these bills in the halls of Congress. So I know we have a few questions in the chat here, and we have about 9 minutes left. I'd invite all of our amazing speakers to come back on camera so we can make sure that everyone has their questions answered. And we are leaving not only imbued with the knowledge to take action in this moment, the energy to raise our voices, but we have all of our questions answered and we're feeling fully equipped to lean in this moment. So just going to open the questions here. I know we have some amazing organizers on this call who are doing work in the faith space, doing work in the voter protection and voting rights space. I think, Dr. Spencer, if I could ask you, Paul is curious how we can bring together some of the different groups that are doing this organizing in our community and really lean into coalition right now.
If persons want to reach out to Vote Riders, we work with several partners across the country. Voter registration is paramount. Everywhere we look, we're registering people to vote, but without the ID, people are challenged. Challenged in registering to vote, challenged in getting to the polls, even challenged in life, as it relates to employment, healthcare, et cetera. And so if you just will reach out to Vote Riders, voteriders.org. Monica, my email address is monica@VoteRiders, and we would be glad to connect you with other organizations that we work with across the country. You can go to our website. Some of our partners are listed on the website. Depending on what your focus is, what it is you want to do, we can connect you with those partnering agencies. And I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. I learned something. Thank you. I also want to turn it over to Christian. There are a few questions that we had in the Q&A a little bit, or getting into the DC budget, how we can take action right now. And some folks are acknowledging that this was an action that was taken not just because of the political conditions, but because of the political power one party has, and there are some concerns that this could happen again. So if you could speak a little bit to how we can organize to prevent this in the future and fight for the rights of DC.
Sure thing. So it's painfully obvious that DC needs the help of all of our partners across the country. DC cannot save itself. DC needs the help of all of our friends and family that we have extended across the country. So it's important for us, in order to restore the $1 billion that was essentially stolen from DC's budget. These are funds that were generated by taxpayer dollars, that by taxpayers paying into DC's city government, as well as corporations and businesses, local businesses that have paid into DC's budget. That these dollars were essentially stolen from DC's budget because of the continuing resolution that was passed earlier this year in order to fund the government. Now, the Senate actually acknowledged and corrected the problem by voting to restore the $1 billion. The House of Representatives have yet to actually respond to the Senate's action. So what I encourage everyone to do is to tell their friends, hey, DC needs help. DC has the authority to govern itself. DC has what's called home rule. If you can, Google it. Google is one of our best friends now in this age of information. So Google DC home rule and see what that actually implies, right? And then to go and talk to their representatives about the fact that DC needs to be able to govern itself since we are not a state of ourselves. And then, so ask your representatives to speak to Speaker Johnson to call for the bill that restores DC's budget, the DC local funds bill that came over from the Senate, to place it on the floor for a floor vote and pass the bill to restore DC's budget, because we're enduring here in DC what the rest of the country is going to endure as far as funds on healthcare, funds on social services, funds on emergency services being stripped from our budget. And so we need that back in order to function as a district that is your nation's capital. And by proxy, support the Washington DC Admissions Act to make DC its own state, right? And then from there, we have to keep a watchful eye on Congress. I'm United Methodist. I'm proud of it, and our United Methodist building was established on Capitol Hill, right next door to the Supreme Court, across the street from the congressional building, to keep a watchful eye on American democracy. Now, it's all important for us to actually do that as our civic duty, as citizens of the United States, to keep a watchful eye on our Congress, to make sure that they're doing what we send them to Congress to do, and for them to actually move forward with such endeavors in order to make sure that DC is well governed, and also to make sure that we're being well taken care of as citizens across the United States. Adam?
Thank you, Christian. It looks like we have time for one more question here. I'd love to pass it over to our resident legislative experts, Jake and Caitlin Jean, or if I might invoke the West Wing, CJ. Somebody asked, recognizing the conditions in Congress, are there specific bills out of this slate of incredible legislation that we really see being able to move, most immediately? Are there certain bills that we really see more energy around right now?
I was going to say I'd let Jake talk first. I think he has such a larger package. Unless, Jake, do you want to take the first stab? Happy to kind of give a overview of just where ours are, but want to give you, since you have the larger, right?
So I think it's an interesting moment, right? I think the answer to the big question is no, but that's where, right, laying the groundwork now, right, is so important, so that as soon as we do have the power, we do have the votes, we're able to go immediately, right? Like, all the groundwork has been laid, and it's just a matter of taking the votes. On the other hand, that means that you find your partners, you find your individual things of where you can find actual alignment. So the bill that I was talking about, the Free Elections Act, the funding election innovations, is bipartisan. That has a Republican on it. I've been trying to find other Republicans for the one about using campaign funds for care. Some folks have been interested, and just finding your partners on different things and using the moment, using the message, finding people for whom it's personal, or it's, you've got somebody in their community who can talk to them, or there's something going on in their district or their background that really fits whatever it is that you're talking about. And so elections and voting is a hard one for a bunch of reasons. But ultimately, that's where all of you come in and helping lay the groundwork for what's next, so that as soon as we have the opportunity to do so, we are ready to hit the ground running.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
I would agree with that. I would just point out that I know that the right to vote is too often disenfranchised for specific communities. But when we're having these conversations, the right to vote is for everybody, and it applies not just blue states or blue cities, but red states and all states. And so having these types of conversations, that it isn't just about under the guise of, well, these are just going to be Democratic voters who are going to outnumber this way, it only helps Democrats. That's not true. And particularly if you think about the Swift Vote Act for us, for communities that have just been struck by natural disasters, getting the availability to go out to different polling locations because certain ones have been destroyed by natural disasters, particularly for rural communities, that's vital for them. It's not an easy drive out to these communities. And so, I think framing and having that bigger holistic picture is vital when even having these conversations, in understanding this isn't just a blue state issue, blue city issue, this is a United States issue. And, while these, the demographic structure right now with where we're at in Congress obviously is quite the uphill battle. I think having that discussion now, again, like Jake was saying, builds that groundwork and lets people see that this is just a general disenfranchisement issue. And same for the Democracy Restoration Act, right? You have people who have been convicted of crimes that aren't, just Democrats, they're Republicans or they're independents. And, if you frame it in the way that, you had January 6th people who had, were in prison, you had, the president himself should understand the threat that it poses for having been, convicted of a crime. These are everybody issues. This isn't just, a political alignment one. And I think having that understanding and breaking it down on a personal level that isn't political, it's personal, and it's about just participation in democracy. Regardless of that outcome, it is about participation. And I think building that discussion up, even though it is an uphill battle right now, we're building that support going into next Congress and even in the future.
Thank you so much, CJ. Thank you, Jake. I want to thank Reverend Dr. Monica Spencer and, of course, Reverend Moya, as well as my amazing co-chairs, Talia and Christian. I really appreciate being able to share this space with you this evening for your wisdom, your words of empowerment. And I just want to say whether this will be your 50th protest on Thursday or it's your first time. We are all in this together, and I'm deeply honored. We are all so grateful to be working alongside you in this fight. I just want to end with a quote from Pirkei Avot. We are not obligated to complete this work, but neither are we free to desist from it. Right? And by being on this call, by leaning in together, we are doing this work side by side. Thank you all. Appreciate your time. Have a wonderful rest of your evening.